Well, hey there, how you doing? Dave Fennoy here. Another Wednesday, another Ask Dave Fennoy Anything, because it is 6 p.m. Pacific, and here we are together again. Just a couple of reminders. All of the Ask Dave Fennoy Anythings live on my YouTube channel, Dave Fennoy Voiceover Training. This will, after we're done today. If you are interested in voiceover coaching with me, davefennoy.com. Click on the Study VO tab at the top and you can book yourself. And if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, please do, at Dave Fennoy VO. Little business to take care of. It's coming up, VO Atlanta. And this is one of the conventions that you don't want to miss. This is year number 11, I believe. And it just gets better and better every year. It's where we can get together as a voiceover community and meet each other, learn from each other. We're all at home in our home studios, and sometimes it gets kind of lonely. And besides the lonely, there's a lot to learn. Speaking of learning, I'll be doing a couple of X sessions on voice acting for video games. One on Friday, from 1 to 4, and one on Saturday from 4:30 to 7:30. I'll also be part of the BIPOC VO panel, and I'll be on the gaming panel as well. All right. Business taken care of. So let's meet our guest. There he is, Marc Preston. Good to see you, man.
Applause. How awesome is that? That's the only time I've gotten applause in a long time.
But your wife.
I'm gonna bask in the glow of your applause.
For you?
I'm sorry.
Your wife doesn't applaud for you?
I don't have a wife. I do have kids, though.
Oh yeah, well,
and they do not applaud.
The kids should applaud. The kids should applaud. No, I understand. How old are your kids?
Okay, I got my daughter, Lily's she's going to be 21 here soon. And I have a son who's 19, Zachary, and Emma, who just ran upstairs. She's 18. So
okay, well, about the time they turn 27, 28, and they realize that Dad knew some things we didn't think he knew, they'll start applauding. I remember when I was about that age, suddenly my parents seemed a lot smarter than they were when I was 15 or 16.
Yeah, when you start learning those lessons, they were right.
Yeah.
But no, it's funny. You bring that up because if you remember, I brought my daughter Emma with me to That's Voiceover last year.
Yeah,
and she could care less. She grew up with a studio, being in the house, but she was like all about Dave Fennoy sitting next to him during my panel. I think she realized I was on stage. She was just hanging out with you, So.
Well, that was really nice. It's nice to have some fans, and when you're in cartoons and video games, it's a little different than just being that disembodied voice on TV promos and commercials and that kind of thing. Now, the voiceover community comes to you, but you don't get those regular people fans. But hey. So it goes.
Yeah, it's so funny because I'm the promo voice of the ABC station, excuse me, where we live, and we'll be sitting on the sofa and a promo comes on with me, and I nudge my daughter, and she's like, whatever, she's could care less. Her daddy's coming out of the TV, So it's okay. It's okay. I got my fellow VO folk who appreciate the life, as it were.
Yeah.
So no, thank you, by the way, for having me on. This is such a fun pleasure and an honor, and thank you so much for having me here.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, because you are somebody that I really want to talk to, that I think this audience will learn a lot from. I think your story is interesting, and just one more thing on that little fun thing, family applauding for you or not. Last night, for some reason, some old VO people came up. Ernie Anderson. Somehow his name got mentioned. I don't remember how it started, but my wife heard something to, who is that? And I go, oh, that's Ernie Anderson. And I grew up in Cleveland, and he was the voice of the
Yeah.
station, and he had this character Goulardi that played C and D horror movies on Friday nights. It was the number one show in its time slot. And then, of course, he came out here, was the voice of ABC, the voice of Ford, and
America's Funniest Home Videos.
and
Yeah.
America's Funniest Home Videos.
Yeah.
He was the first $1 million voice,
Yeah.
and
And Paul Thomas Anderson's father as well.
exactly. And she said, "Well, what kind of person was he?" I said, "Well, if you told him to cut the shit, he was okay." And she said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, let me play you some outtakes." And I found them on YouTube, and he is cussing out producers and mixers and just,
He
um,
has an 11-minute outtake reel, which I remember my mentor back this 30 years ago. My mentor said, "You got to check this out. 11 minutes of just." He gave me new four-letter. He could
yes.
combine four-letter words in a series and craft. Oh God, Ernie Anderson was just like he's one of those people I would have loved to have met. You
Oh,
know.
I
He-
did meet him. We had the
oh
same agent.
really?
My first day in town, my first day in that agency, he was there. And as I was coming in to sign papers and meet all the agents, he was walking out. And I said, "Oh wow, Ernie Anderson, how you doing? My name's Dave Fennoy. I listened to you in Cleveland. I grew up with you, man. Goulardi, turn blue, purple cliff." And he goes, "Yeah, nice to see you, kid," and on out the door. But we got to know each other a little bit. But where I was going with this was once again to wives and family, not necessarily putting us on the pedestals that some other people might. There was an interview with his wife, and she said sometimes she was just so mad at him. And what she really liked when she was riding in the car or had the television on and his voice came on and she could turn it off.
That's all. Actually, I heard something that he is one of the reasons why the Sennheiser 416 mic is kind of so ubiquitous in the world of promo. And I think he was the voice of the Carol Burnett show or something like that. And he couldn't get across town to Burbank, wherever. And he said, "I'll just record it here." And he liked it so much. I don't know if this is a true story. This is the story I
Well,
was told.
you've got
And
part of it right. He was the voice of ABC. He didn't want to be in a booth by himself. He wanted to
mhm,
be in the room with everybody else.
yeah.
And up until that time, hey, you were in a booth someplace. Yeah, you might be able to see him through the glass. And they were trying to figure out, well, and he was kind of persnickety. I were trying to figure out how do we please this guy, and somebody said, "Well, how about that Sennheiser 416? They use it on movie sets and TV sets, and they brought it in, and it particularly doesn't listen to much that's not right in front of it, and it worked. And because it's
Mhm,
designed for the voice, it worked. And as time went on, other people started using them, especially for promo, and it got the label of the LA voiceover mic. And I've
mhm.
been using one for decades. I have one you can pound hammers with it, or pound nails with it, and no, don't do that. Don't
Oh,
do
yeah,
that.
like we were talking about. I've got the same 416 in my booth over here. It's older than my daughter, my youngest daughter. So I know it's about 19 years old, I think. It's heading towards no, 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 no. I think it turned 20. I think it turned 20. I feel like a relationship with our microphones here.
Oh
So
boy, you
I
know
use my
what?
Loudon microphone here, but
I bought mine sometime in the '90s. I don't know what date, but it was probably not '95, '96. And there was a place, Coast Recorders, here in LA that had dinosaur uh, tape machines, 24 track, 16 track,
mhm.
and lots of used microphones and other sound gear. Um, and I went in and bought one used. I think I
Mhm.
paid like $700, $800 for it, and it was old then. And that sucker
Right.
still works. It still works. Still great mic.
They're a tank, I think it's because 'cause they're really meant to hang off of a microphone boom over people's heads on movie sets, so they could take a lot of abuse.
Yeah.
But no, I've had mine for so long. I just it's so funny, you forget how long you have pieces of gear in your studio, and you have it's almost like you have a relationship with them. You
Oh, you
you
do.
know?
You
It's
do.
like
And I've bought a bunch of
but I
microphones over the years that I just don't use. They're a collection now. I need to, put them on the wall as artwork or something. But anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about you, Marc Preston. Where did you grow up, Marc?
I am a native of Dallas, Texas. I grew up in a suburb, North Dallas. It's called Richardson,
Oh yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
it's grew up there. Started off my career there, and I'm very much Texan. Just literally, exactly 1 month ago today, I finally moved back to Texas. We're down on South Padre Island, and so
Oh,
we're.
okay.
By the way, it's island time. Got to do the beverage. So
You got your,
it.
your Mexican beer, a nice
Yeah, I'm like,
Modelo.
hey man, it's happy hour.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But no, I'm
Well,
back to living in
go ahead,
Texas, and
take
I've
a
been all
couple
over.
swigs. It'll
Oh
loosen you up.
gosh.
We'll learn some things you didn't mean for us to learn. Uh, I was looking at your resume, at your bio, and you were a child actor.
I was my very first acting gig ever. And I don't know if I put this in the bio. I was 7. I was in an ABC movie of the week. I don't know. I mean, you remember those Sunday
Oh yeah.
night ABC movie of the week. It was there was a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader movie. Now, not only was there a Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders movie, I was in the sequel with John Davidson from the TV show That's Incredible. I played a child who had the Scottish Rite Hospital in Dallas, and one of the cheerleaders was my nurse. And so
Wow.
I started at 7 years. Yeah, not many people know. I started off in an ABC movie of the week. And I was 7, so I didn't fully appreciate the fact that all these cheerleaders thought I was the most adorable kid, and I remember we were over at one of the dance studios where they practice, and somebody was having a birthday, like, "Hey, Mark, come in here and have a birthday." So all these cheerleaders in their leotards and whatever, they're like, think I'm the cutest thing. 7 years old, I didn't appreciate quite the way I would have at maybe 13 or 14, I don't
Oh yeah.
think. So, but that's where I started. That's where the whole game started. And then I was in, TV commercials and things like that. And that's kind of where the whole ride began until I was
Okay,
17
so
and I started
you're you're a kid actor, and you go into radio. And how did that happen?
17 years old, and I was working. I'm sorry, I was working on a history project, and on my bed. And the DJ was. I still remember the question. The DJ, guy named Ken Bell, worked for 100.3 Jams. The format Churban, CHR Urban. They would
Oh
play
yeah.
New
Oh
Kids on
yeah.
the Block
That was a morning jack
and
on a
Keith
turban
Sweat.
station.
Yeah. Oh, I love so I was listening to that, and he said, "Who is uh 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 Phil Donahue's wife?" I don't know why he asked that question,
Oh, I know.
but
I know. I know.
Mark.
It's Mrs. Donahue. No. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. It was Margot. I can't think of her last name. Maybe I'm getting it wrong, but that was many, many moons ago. That was actually as of tomorrow, 34 years ago. Tomorrow's my birthday, and that's a whole different story we'll get to in a moment. But
Well, happy almost
she,
birthday,
well, thank you, but belated happy birthday to you, my friend.
and thank you.
So, but no, he asked that question. I was like, I'm inviting uh, distractions from doing my history project. So I call up trying to win the tickets for whatever they're giving away. And I won. And he said, okay, I need your information. And he said, how old are you? And he said, 17. And he's like, oh, no, these are tickets to a nightclub. You can't get into a nightclub. But have you ever thought about getting into radio? And it's like, just like I told him, like every day, that was I was wanting to do radio for years, since I was a little kid. And a month later, he had me in on February 1st, 1990. He had me come into the studio to be a guest DJ on my birthday. And from there, the bug bit me.
Oh, sorry about that.
More applause. Nice. I like it. And then after that, it was about 1 month, almost exactly after that, I started as a producer and worked and started doing part-time at a station called Y95 in Dallas. It was a top 40 station. And from there, just kind of the start is anybody that's worked in radio, and I know a lot in the voiceover community started in radio, that once your foot's in the door, the ball starts rolling and then the story starts. And so that's how the game began. I loved the theater of the mind that was radio. I loved listening to radio when I was a kid.
Oh yeah. Well, you and I came from a time when disc jockeys had a little more freedom.
Mhm.
And
Well, the
I
shows had to be a show. They couldn't
yeah,
just be a
yeah.
shift. They couldn't just
We,
be a couldn't just be playing music. You had to be doing a thing. Yeah.
yeah, we might have missed where DJs were kind of musicologists, where they
Mhm.
were picking the records. That time had gone. But if you had personality, if you could tell some jokes, if you could create some characters, um, you could have a great career. It's amazing how people always felt like they knew you, that you were their friend.
Mhm.
I always loved being on the radio until all the business of the radio stuff
Oh gosh,
started
yeah.
happening.
Oh yeah, it was so much fun because back when I was a kid, as for those that are from the Dallas area, I remember a guy named Kid Craddock who was he had a syndicated
Uh,
show and he passed away a number of years ago and wonderful talent, but he was doing 7 to midnight. So when you hear these great people, these talent that rose to doing the morning show back when they were doing the night show and they were pulling everything out of the bag of tricks. The theater of the mind was amazing, and these guys were doing this not with digital editing and creating stuff. They had reel-to-reel quarter-inch tape machines,
oh
you know.
yes, I remember
The amount of
slicing tape on that tape block.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people don't I will say for you young or newer VO talent, you don't know how lucky you are having digital editing. You don't know what it's like to have your fingernails, a little etch marks in there from razor blades and just edit, grease pencils. But it was a great time because I was on the back end of it was before the corporate radio thing happened. You still had
Yeah,
a
yeah,
bunch of different ownership groups. So it was a great time. The greatest thing, I was at an age where the guys who were rocking and rolling in the 70s and even the early mid 80s, they had these great stories. I love the guys with gray hair and they had stories I can't repeat even here, but things that they were doing and names and there was a whole world in radio, and I think that kind of not to speak disparagingly of radio now, but it was a different ecosystem. And radio was a form of entertainment, because of the personality, not just because of the music. So I really enjoyed that aspect and that time, that moment in my career as a young puppy DJ, most certainly.
yeah. And you went on from local radio to being on syndicated on an ABC show.
Yeah, I had 3 tours of duty at ABC Radio in Dallas. The first one, was when they had they acquired the satellite music network. So, basically, they had formats: country, oldies, Hot AC was the one I worked for, the adult contemporary format in. Um, I did that when I was, I think, 20 years old. And then I enjoyed it. It was a great experience, and then I really love terrestrial radio, good old fashioned all American
Oh yeah,
radio, and I had an opportunity to work at KDMX in Dallas, the hot AC station there for a number of years, and then I bounced around to New Orleans and everything, but I came and actually it's funny. That was one of my first big gigs, and it was my last gig I had a syndicated show on ABC doing something called Retro Saturday Night. It was so much fun. You mentioned the era when DJs can choose their own music. And really, satellite radio is a little different animal. The timing is really down to the second. But I was able to choose, it was truly a request thing. And of course I had to do the ebb and flow of all this great music out of the 80s from like 79 about 90 91. And it was a lot of fun. Had like, Rick Springfield and Belinda Carlisle and all the people from the era would be on the show with me. And it was my last tour duty in radio, and it was, I felt like Michael Corleone. They kept pulling me back in, even though I was full time doing voiceover. I think I did the last full time show I did was a morning show, and I realized I don't like mornings. I don't like waking up. I am a night owl. But I had a great career in radio, and it was really a great jumping off point into voiceover. But I do miss it. And that's we'll talk about later. But to me, the podcasts now are they have the DNA at some level of the old school radio, and it's kind of the free form, just conversation or kind of like Ask Dave Fennoy Anything. It's just kind of yeah, but no, it was a great career. I made stops ever so briefly in LA and New Orleans. I was there for a while and had a great time. I mean, I had I look at Joe Cipriano wrote that book about
oh yeah,
was it Living on Air? I think's the name
yeah,
of it.
yeah.
And I was like, God, I think everybody who spent any appreciable amount of time in radio has such interesting stories, the people they met, the things they got to do, the mischief they got into. And I'm tempted just to write a book just so that as I get a little older, I don't forget,
You
because
know what?
I
That's
work with really
interesting.
talented people.
I've been kind of formulating in my mind writing a book, what I would write about, um, how much of my life, but definitely the years in radio would definitely be there. But let's move on in your career. So you're doing voiceover, you're doing radio. At some point, you let radio go. Um, were you able to just do voiceover without any training from anybody, or did you get training from anyone?
Oh, it's really funny. I'm hard-headed, very hard-headed, and, like any young I started VO right about the time I started working in radio. Um, and we all have, even with my students, it's kind of the same thing. You have the impression that all voiceover is kind of a certain thing, and when you work in radio, you have your production at the end of your shift you have to go do. People don't really realize this who aren't in radio, but you have certain you have to do dub commercials or voice stuff, and it's always like you have a date or a dinner, you want to go do something, and it's the last thing you want to be doing. But it intrigued me, and I was like, man, I really kind of enjoy this. And I spent more and more time when I was working at ABC Radio, that they had a whole production floor. They had many floors in an office building, and they had like 8 production rooms, 8 track, I mean, really beautiful production rooms. And I could just go down there and fart around. I mean, just play, record, play it back. And I was eating it up. I was having so much fun doing the voicing stuff. Um, and I met a guy, my program director at ABC. I said, "Listen, I really want to do VO." She's like, "You really should." And she said, "Go connect with a guy named Jerry Houston." Now, Jerry was a local guy back. He did nationals. He was the voice of American Airlines. He sounded kind of like Mason Adams, kind of like
Kind of like
American
Mason
Airlines,
Adams.
Smuckers. Yeah, he was such a sweetheart of a guy, but he really set the template for me because a lot of it was, performance, but a lot of it was just sitting down and talking about the business and forging relationships. And I'd show up to his office, and he was such a sweetheart of a guy. And he had a little studio with a fellow named Bob Magruder together, and they had a studio, and I'd go meet up with them. And in Dallas, there's this chain of restaurants called La Madeleine. It's kind of like a little French bistro-ish thing. And God love him, I'll go ahead and say, but I go and I'd show up and I say, "Hey Jerry, what's up? I just want to talk. I want to talk voiceover. That's all I wanted to do." And Jerry would say, "You want to go downstairs and fuck around?" What that meant was go downstairs, get a glass of wine. He wanted to talk radio because he came from radio,
Yeah.
and I could ask him about VO, and we would just, and he was such a pro, and he taught me so much, like little things, like I'd show up and he's filling out Christmas cards. And I said, "You fill out Christmas cards for your clients?" He's like, "Yes, if they pay me $1." He said, "If they pay me at least $1, I'm going to send them a Christmas card." I was like, little things like, well, that makes sense. My father ran car dealerships, and I saw the way those guys would prospect. They had something called a tickler file, which is like a little 3x5 index card box with 2 sets of tabs. Like one is January through December, one's 1 through 31. And I know those guys would take out all the cards. Each one's a different client or prospect. And at the beginning of the month, they'd strew them out throughout the month, 1 through 31. And I saw what Jerry was doing, and I was like, "Oh man, this makes so much sense." I grew up watching all these goofy car salesmen do the same thing. I was like, "Oh, so this is about relationships also, or like building a." He's like, "Absolutely." So more than anybody, I think in my career, I credit him with the business sense of knowing this is a relationship gig, not just performance, but you really want to. And this is back in 1990 to 93, somewhere around there. So anyway, that's my long story about my mentor, Jerry Houston. He was already in his 60s by the time I was 20. So he's since departed, but he was such a talented guy. And back when you can make money hand over fist just as a regional voiceover person,
Yeah.
he was national, but still, there was back in the 80s, you could make some money doing VO because there weren't. It's not like right now when a lot of folks
Well,
are
there
kind
are
of in
more
the ecosystem.
people in this business now than ever before. There's also more opportunity now than ever before. But Uh, the water doesn't always rise to meet the number of boats in it. So
Right.
we're in an interesting time in voiceover. The threat of AI, also maybe the opportunity of AI.
Mhm.
None of this is really settled. Um,
Well, it's always been in flux. And it's a one thing that the only constant in life, and especially in VO, is change, whether it be
change.
technology or, and by the way, so I'm just realizing I was looking on camera. If everybody's like, why does this house look like a mess?
You
No,
know,
I've still got, I'm still
from
unpacking.
here it doesn't look like a mess. You didn't have to
Oh,
tell
because
us. You didn't
I'm
have to give
still
it up. Oh,
unpacking
oh,
boxes right
I
now.
can see the box over there. I can see the box over there. But see,
Oh, yeah, I've got all kinds of mischief.
the last few
Uh,
times we've talked, you oh man, we're moving. We're just getting these boxes, and yeah, I think I can
yeah.
still do it today. And clearly you've been doing a lot of work, and the Modelo is helping you
Oh, yeah.
settle down
But
into the evening.
it's the light one though, it's like I gotta look out for my girlish figure. I gotta make sure I look
Oh,
cute,
there you
so
go.
you gotta
There
do
you
the
go.
light. But it's that time of day. I figure on the island. I gotta do one beer, so why
Yeah.
not?
And I'm going to say, I went to your website. You've got a great website. Your demos are fantastic. Um, and you have a whole separate website about teaching and helping people.
Mhm.
Marc Preston Consulting, I believe is,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, Mark Preston Consultant.
markprestonconsulting.com.
I said
Uh,
consultant.com. You can tell 'em from text,
consultant.com.
markprestonconsultant.com.
And you've been
Yes.
teaching for about 20 years now.
Yeah, I started off teaching workshops, because it was fun. People would come to me. I happened to be in New Orleans, and that's back when Hollywood South was really cranking, a lot of movies, and you had a lot of actors there and people who were interested in voiceover, and I was kind of the go-to. People would come to me asking questions. I said, "Let me do this in a little more formal of a situation as opposed to being," I'm sure as you know, getting phone calls and emails, and let me aggregate, say, "On this Saturday, come on out. We'll spend a few hours talking voiceover." And I really loved it. I really came to love it because, for a multitude of reasons, because I remember being back before the advent of the internet, before it was so ubiquitous, obviously, but going into Jerry Houston's office and just sitting there talking with him. And I realized a lot of folks don't have that. You got to find somebody who is sort of your Sherpa, kind of, And that was fun because I felt like that was my pay it forward thing. And I got more into doing that. And of course, with the internet, able to work with folks all over the world, really, So it ended up being something that it's not my bread and butter, but it's something I really I enjoy. And quite frankly, I think it makes me a better talent. And every student I work with makes me a better coach. So it's a
It's
learning process on its own.
it's interesting. I've told students over the years from time to time that uh, selfishly teaching uh, reminds me all the time of what I need to do as a voice
Yeah.
talent myself. And I don't know that if I weren't teaching, I wouldn't find a way to remind myself, but it definitely makes me accountable to myself and the things I tell other people. Let me
I
ask
was
you
about to
this:
say accountable is it's funny when you're in a booth and you realize, you know what would I tell my student? Oh shit. I was doing a political yesterday and I was like, why am I not just focusing on who I'm speaking with in this moment? I'm sitting there going to like, I would tell my student, it's kind of funny. You catch yourself in moments,
Well,
but yeah, it's,
there was something you said, something that you wrote about yourself, um, that you like the idea of always being a working student,
mhm.
of always challenging yourself to stay fresh, to learn. Well, don't let me put words in your mouth. You tell me.
No, that's exactly it. I think that there's a point in time, I think, when you hit a performance phase and you're doing well and you get a little bit of blinders on and you forget, well, if I'm perfect in this moment, well, the industry is going to change and I still need to adapt and learn. And I think Ethan Hawke said something once. He was like, I think he said, I'm a professional student or something to that. I forgot how he put it, but and when I heard him say, I was like, I've been feeling the same way. And so I've been saying something similar because what happens is I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I don't want to be the most educated. I don't want to be the most successful necessarily because I still want to learn. I still want to adapt. And I learned that patience It's a marathon, not a sprint race, and it's always evolving. It's kind of like being a parent.
Yeah.
You could be the best parent on planet Earth, and you know everything to say to your kids. Well, tomorrow they're a year old. Tomorrow they're a little bit older. There are new issues that come up, so you're in a constant state of adaptation. And that's the reason why I was like, I just want to be a student. I just want to be learning, and I'm so turned on by the idea of trying out new things and
Yeah.
being uncomfortable. That's from that discomfort where it's like, you know, uh, an analogy I use is when I worked out with a trainer at the gym, which I need to probably do again. But I remember him saying, okay, don't do it like that. Do it like this, lift or do whatever a certain way. And I said, well, that feels uncomfortable. He said, yes, but that's proper form.
Yeah.
And then about a month later, doing anything but that would feel awkward. So I like learning from the people around me, and I do learn from my students. I sound the way I sound, and some of worked with a couple students today, much younger sounding, hipper sounding. They're going to get gigs I'm not going to be able to get. But hearing their approach and listening to their process, especially some of the actors. I mean, I work with kids who are on Disney Channel, and I listen to them going, man, one thing I learned is kids remember because they haven't forgotten how to play. And
Yeah.
that's where I think kids have a leg up on us. And that's why I love working with kids. When I do it maybe once, twice a year. It's not frequent. Or it might be a little bit more than that. But it's so much fun because, when you have somebody who's inspired and they just have, we are choice making machines as actors
Yes.
and voice talent. And these kids, where we sometimes you have a hard time figuring you're stressing, okay, what choice should I make? One of the kids is in the booth with 1,000 different choices to make. They're like, I'm gonna try them all. It's just so much fun to watch, so
It's
I'm always
funny.
learning.
One of the things I notice, especially with students who, I'll just throw out, I'll say 25 and older. It's
Mhm.
probably a little younger than that, but where people are trying this on as something new, and they're working so hard and they're so stiff in wanting to
Mhm.
do it right that they lose that childlike joy of just letting it
Joy,
happen.
yeah. I use that
Uh,
word today, joy. Yeah, I agree. I always say there's no such thing as right or wrong or good or bad. They're only the choices you make and the subjective opinion of the buyer. There's never been a right or wrong.
yeah.
So that kind of, I want folks to be, I like, I'm a mistake making machine, yeah, I'm learning,
I'll go back to Ernie Anderson, listening to his outtakes last night. The number of times he screwed up, the number of times he's finding his way. Now, he would cuss somebody else out and tell them the writing sucked and so forth and so on. But it almost said, oh, so I don't have to worry that I make mistakes. And I tell my students the same thing. Look, don't worry when you make a mistake. We all do. It's not
Mhm.
about making mistakes. It's about being able to correct that mistake and bring the truth of what you're saying out again. Uh,
Mhm.
if you allow that mistake to get in your head, oh God, I made this mistake. Uh, we're all going to make mistakes, and all through life we're going to make mistakes. Hopefully, not ones that we can't get over. So when you
Well, I
when you're
love the
work,
idea. When I tell my students, when you make a mistake, just keep on going. Don't go back to don't hit return to zero. Go to one. Go back to the beginning. Just keep going because in that moment, I find that you're the most disarmed. Like you did a little trip up, but you're kind of disarmed. You're a little more loose. You just keep going.
yeah,
It is just one of the exercises I use when we're just practicing. I do it with myself. I just keep going. And I just like it's there. It's too easy to get kind of I know. Yeah, I always say we're living in the realm of your subconscious. Like Sanford Meisner said, act before you think. Your instincts are more honest than your thoughts. You kind of have to get out of your head and just let whatever happens happen sometimes and be surprised on playback.
yeah. The old
That's
acting is reacting. I find that even when I'm working with somebody on their demo, and they've done 4 or 5 reads. And nowadays they're recording in their home studio, wherever that is, and they're sending me the
Mhm.
files. And sometimes what I hear when it gets to me in my studio is different than what I heard when they were doing it. My
Mhm.
reaction to it, and I will take that read that I thought didn't like that one that much, and you know what? That's the one, which is why I always say now, don't just send me the takes I said I thought were best. Send them all. Send them all.
Mhm.
And the thing I always
But
find out,
don't you find that the first take, the percentage-wise, don't you find the first take, the first blush, the first ex th isn't that oftentimes the best one?
yeah,
I'm not saying the best one, but, it's in terms of batting average, it has a pretty good batting average, the
yeah,
first
it
read being
does.
a pretty solid.
And even if it's not the one completely because there was a foible here or whatever, uh, it's the one you need to redo in the same vein.
Yeah.
Not necessarily try to duplicate, but whatever that feeling, that energy, whatever was motivating you, let that come back because that was honest. So, you
Well,
know,
real quick, since it's Ask Dave Fennoy Anything, I wanna ask you a question.
uh-oh.
Do you prefer now so much, if not the majority of everything happens in our own studio space, do you miss the time when you spend a lot of time you're doing you're doing the animation video game thing where you kinda have to be in their studio, but do you have a preference? Do you like the social, the buzz of being in another studio, or do you find more comfort being in your space? Do
Well,
you have a preference?
I like being in my studio space. I like the not having to drive for 45 minutes, an hour to do a half hour gig and then drive back, or sometimes a 5 minute gig
Mhm.
and then drive back. Uh, but I do like the 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 human connection to walk in and be able to shake hands with somebody or say hello. They're in the booth next to me as opposed to who knows where on the planet.
Right.
Not that I dislike that, but I like when I have more of a balance. That and I really like it when I have a director.
Right.
And one of the changes in this business, I think more people are working without directors than working with directors these days. That you get some copy that you did the audition, you get it, they book you. Oh, can you have it to us by such and such a time? And then you're just giving them what you think they want based on the fact that they hired you. And one of the problems with that is sometimes you send it in and now they want to come back and redirect you or give you
Yeah.
notes. And I always feel like, look, we could have solved this in this first session if you make yourself available. You can't force
Yeah,
people.
it's so funny. Isn't it funny, like, how many times and I tell my students this, that a lot of times I said, "You're gonna be surprised by how many times that the person you're working with, as creative and awesome as they are, they don't know exactly what they want until they hear it."
Yeah.
So that's where you're a collaborator instead of a hired gun necessarily.
And well, a lot of times if they know who you are and that thing that you do, especially if you have, if it's a particular way of doing a particular thing, a style that you have for, and it's this kind of thing, maybe they're asking for that. Uh, but all too often, exactly what you're saying is the case. They kind of have an idea. They think they want this, but they don't know what it is until they hear it. And sometimes that's diametrically opposed to the thing that they asked for. So I
Mhm.
always tell my students, look, try and give them what they want, but give them,
Mhm.
trust your instincts. Give them what you think this is. Because I can't tell you, and I'm sure you have the same story of how many times you read the specs, you gave them the specs, um, and then when you heard it on air a couple of weeks later, it was just so different.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it's funny, it's kinda brings up this is a side note. My very first national I ever did, I'm not gonna say the product, it was one of those call 1-900, or 1-800, sorry, not 1-900, let's clarify. It's like one of those, 90-second commercials, is a product. And I kept going, they're giving me the most bizarre they said, "Okay, we want James Earl Jones. We want," and then they said they wanted, oh god, what's his, Alec Baldwin. And I'm sitting there thinking, what? I just don't feel like did they hear my demo? My first agent was, as my people say, is a little mashugana. He sent the wrong talent in. They asked for somebody, and he crisscrossed. So I showed up to my first national. They didn't even cast me. They cast somebody else, and I'm sitting there, and they're going, I'm sitting there going, they're probably going, this is not what we wanted, you know. So, but I will say, I went back to my mentor and I said, listen, this I had this horrible experience. My first national. I'm like, I'm not in tears or anything. I'm like, is this for me? You know, so well, the very next one, it was with Patrick Stewart doing a GTE commercial. So I was like, oh, I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard, so things are okay now. You know, I can stay in this business a little bit longer. You know, but no, when you, you know, to have your very first big gig be something you weren't even cast for, you know, and you show up and they're like, um, this is not what we were looking for at all, and you think you totally failed, but everywhere else, you know, I think it's worked out pretty okay the last couple decades, you
Oh
know.
yeah, oh yeah. Well, you
Um,
know what? And you're gonna go through ups and downs. You're gonna book some things. My very first national thing that I booked, I went in. It was a great session. They loved me. They loved me. They loved me. I asked them when it was going to play. They told me. And this is very early in my career. I think I was at town for a month or two, and so I, told mom and dad, all my friends and family, and um, the show came on, and when the commercial came on, it was another voice. I had been replaced. Uh,
oh god, yeah, 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 yeah.
and it's the kind of thing that could have crushed you. Um, and it hurt a little bit. But you find out, somebody had that job before you. Somebody's going to have it after you. Um, we're not going to. We don't own any of this.
When you realize you're a cog in the machine, an important, very important cog, but there's a lot of. I always tell people we're the caboose on the train, we're the bow on the package to wrap everything up, and you don't know how many people. When I did some on-camera acting, I was in an ABC miniseries once, and they said, "Well, we have to, you know, so the director likes you, so and so likes you, but they have to go to the network." And like, how many people are having to sign off on? I was
Dozens.
a day player, you
Yeah.
know, and it's surprising. So I've learned a long time ago, you can't take anything personally or you're gonna go nuts, you
Yeah.
know?
Well,
And, but yeah, that
it's bad enough that you have to take it financially uh, when you finish. It's
yeah.
that thing that you wanted. And much as I like to say, um, I don't really care anymore about each individual audition. There's still a few that come through and you go, oh, yeah, it'd be really good
Yeah,
to get
uh-huh.
this thing. And sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. I always find that when they're looking for a Dave Fennoy type, that's the kiss of death. If they go, yeah, we're looking for a Dave Fennoy type. And, they never
Oh.
pick Dave Fennoy. I don't get, what's that all about?
Well, but you've been able to do the things, and I was talking with my son because he, you know, does the video game thing. I'm always blown away by video game. I had no idea until he put Red Dead Redemption on TV or one of the other games. I forgot which one. Grand Theft Auto is like how dynamic these games are. It's like it's a genre I've never played with, but it's so intriguing to me. And you know, you get to live in that world and the mocap and all that stuff. And it's such a, you know, it's a different world than just a commercial or a
Yeah.
TV promo or, you know, it's way more dynamic, more people are involved, and it's just so cool that
You,
I'm sure you have things come along, you've been doing it long enough where, you know, I can do when you can say to yourself, honestly, "I feel like I can do this," and you don't get it, it's like, you know, but you gotta let
well,
some things go, I guess,
but
but, you know,
I've
so
learned that um, it doesn't come down to your wonderful audition. There's so many other variables, as you mentioned, the number of
mhm.
people has to go through. Maybe your voice sounds too similar to somebody else. Or maybe it's Dave Fennoy. He's been on so many things. Let's find somebody fresh and new. Or maybe, I get the thing. Oh, it's Dave Fennoy. We know he can handle it. You don't know. All you can do is at bats, audition.
Exactly. It's kinda like, Bryan Cranston said, you know, he was talking about once, that he auditioned, and he was always looking at it as a chance to get somebody to like him, to hire him, to give him a thing. He's asking for something, you know, when he goes in, and he wasn't booking a lot, and he changed his mindset to, you know what? The audition is the job. I'm gonna go and do my thing and go to lunch wherever. And and he started booking more. It's so funny how the subconscious, the mindset that you have is so important. I think it's important professionally, but also your own mental health. I think is I see people in the voiceover community. We got almost as of tomorrow. I think we'll have 36,000 people in there, and I see so many people who stress over each individual audition. It's like, you know what? Just have fun. Like you mentioned the word joy. This should be a joyous thing. This should be like we get to do something, no matter how much you book or don't book. You get to do something which is creative, and you get to express yourself in some creative way. Just have fun. I dare say, there was a surf documentary I love, called Riding Giants, or this maybe be Step into Liquid. I forgot which one. And somebody asked a surfer. He said, "Who do you feel is the best surfer in the world?" And I was assuming you say Kelly Slater or whatever. He's like, man, whoever's having this most fun, the biggest smile, and I think that in VO, I think we have to look at it like that. Like, have fun, because I think you can't, if you have a lot of stress in VO, you kind of have to take a step back. As a little side note, that was a PSA. You know, um, but no, it's just like that. When you mentioned joy, I meant to say I love that idea. It's just enjoy what you're doing, because there's always going to be somebody booking more than you or booking less. Somebody making more than you, making less. You got your own lane to pay attention to. But
Yeah.
I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but he kind of mentioned that. I was like, I love that idea of just having joy doing the thing. Yeah.
You know what? I want to jump into your podcast, Story and Craft.
Ah, yeah.
How did that get started? Who have you talked to? Who's the most interesting person you've interviewed?
Oh yeah. Modelo break. Mm. Get
I'm
into
going to
this.
have
No,
a break too. I
it's
won't
so
tell
funny
you what's in
because
this cup.
oh, the coffee cup. It's like being on the panel in a talk show. It's like they don't know what's in the cup. The funny thing, for me is when I worked at ABC, my Lily, Zachary, Emma, my kids I remember them coming to the studio once and did my show, and they don't really remember that much. They're really, really little, and my daughter Lily remembers they had a creek running through the lobby. They had a beautiful atrium at the network, and they don't remember too much about me being. They don't remember me being on the air. And I was like, there's this whole world of experience I had doing this other thing on the microphone, and it kind of like I kind of wish they had checked that out, but it had me thinking. It was just progression of thought. I was like, you know what? There's podcasts out there. What would I do? What turns me on? What makes me? What did I miss about radio? It wasn't really playing the music, though I enjoyed the music. I mean, I got Spotify if I need to hear a song now, but it was the conversations, it was the stories, it was the learning and the sharing, and it was navigating a conversation. And so I decided to do that, and I had experience working with PR agencies and assembling a show which had a lot of interviews with notable folk. And I was like, it also is like, well, what interests me, be it actors? I mean, I've had Neil deGrasse Tyson on, Billy Bob
Mm.
Thornton. I've had, yeah, I've gotten to the point now where I've kind of forgotten some of the people I have on, and with my move, I haven't released an episode in a few weeks, and I need to. But some of the most interesting people I had. One is coming up is one of the I'm at that age where I try to remember somebody's name
Oh,
and my brain
I'm
goes,
so
"No,
glad
you're not
I'm
gonna
not
remember it."
the only one. Thank you.
It was, Zamir Gata is his name. He traveled a lot with, Anthony Bourdain, who's like kind of
Mm.
my spirit animal. I loved Anthony Bourdain, and, he was telling me stories of their travel and in Russia and Ukraine and Eastern Europe, and it was just talking with him, knowing it, and also, and I'm a big food nerd, talking with Andrew Zimmern. And there are common threads as I hear the show over the course of the 30 some odd episodes I've done so far, that food comes up a lot. And anybody that knew like Anthony Bourdain, I'll ask, where were you? Kind of like when he passed away. There are certain things that connect. And, but the actors I've spoken with, they're, it really boils down to, I feel like I'm a better I enjoy the conversation as a show, as a format for the show, but I love learning. You know, you pick up things from people. I tell my like students in voiceover, I talk about pre-flight, preparing to deliver the lines on the page, and the actors I speak with talk about the homework and seeing the parallel between the two before they're before they as they're creating a character. But this just came together because I thought, I really miss these conversations and have fun, and I have the technical prowess to do it. The you know the I I'd done this professionally to some degree in radio and when I worked at ABC, and I just kind of wanted to keep going with it. And it's gotten a lot of traction, which is exciting for me. I look at the download numbers. I'm like, I haven't released an episode in a few weeks, but I mean, we've got a lot of people still downloading the episodes. But the people I've spoken with who I may not know very well, who are maybe actors whose work I'm not terribly familiar with, some of those are the most fun. The So that's really what the podcast for me, Story and Craft, was just kind of it was my creative outlet. And I think some of the most interesting people in voiceover have some other interests that there's some other thing they do besides voiceover. It's not 24/7, 365 VO. There's something else they're passionate
And
about.
I'm gonna say, I think having another life besides just the microphone and the words on the pages that we're reading, have other interests, things that you investigate, listen to. Um, I think that improves your voiceover because
I
when
think
it,
it does. I think it does give you perspective,
yeah.
different ideas, different choices you can make, that kind of a thing.
One of the things I talk about with my students, especially when we're talking video games, is watching people. Learn from watching people. You're at a restaurant. What are people doing? How do they move? How do they talk? What's their body language? What does their face look like when they're scared, when they're curious, when they're confused, uh, because those are the things that help us find it in ourselves and bring it out.
When you eavesdrop, I call it I always say eavesdrop on yourself in conversation when you're with people, and kind of observe yourself as well. You know what you kind of your normal flow, your body language, what you do.
Oh, Mark,
But yeah, I
it's
always
interesting.
say
One of the assignments I give people, look, I want you to, turn on your recorder on your phone. And what do you sound like in your natural habitat when you're just talking to your loved one or your
that's
kids
so
or your
wild you do that
parents or
too. You
your
did that
work?
recommendation also. I thought I was a weirdo going, yes, turn on the phone and just sit down and talk with your wife and be like having a beer, then play it back and hear you. Like, in
Yeah,
what is your because it gets it surprises people sometimes how they sound, then they get on the microphone, then they get very intimate. They're like, no, 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 that's not how you would speak
yeah.
with your coworker. If they did, there would be like a trip to HR,
Well, let
but
me ask: do you work with
but yeah,
headphones?
the recording, what a great with me with when I'm recording.
Yeah,
Are you saying do I work? Yeah, you know what? I only have one on. I leave it on for technical reasons. I'll always leave one off, unless I'm having to do something more intimate where there's a potential. You got to hear the nuance. But that, like for instance, whenever I'm doing an interview, I have these in-ear monitors
uh
that I
huh.
use, which I love, but I'm thinking about using those more in the booth because they don't give me that real warm, sexy sound. I just hear the technical. Um, I'm thinking about the edit when I come back out.
Yeah.
Did I have a mouth noise? Did I forget to have a little sip of water before I got in the booth, and now it sounded like popcorn, going off. But no, I use headphones just for, and I have them turned way low. And I always tell my
Yeah.
students that don't wear headphones when you're practicing. Hear yourself naturally. Because
I have found it to be true that especially people who have the most beautiful voices, when they're wearing headphones, they lean more into the voice and not into the communication. So
Mhm.
unless I have clients that we're on Source Connect or something, I don't wear them. I don't wear them.
It's so funny you say. I've Sometimes I will, my booth is I got a 6x4 booth, and it's very dead sounding in there. Sometimes I just, but sometimes I'll take the cans off and I'll go, "All right, let me just try a couple delivery, just to," and I found I'm at the point to where I'm pretty much on point with where I wanna be, but it took a while. And I don't know if you remember working in radio, and a lot of guys and gals in radio have their cans turned way up. And I don't know if you ever had this happen, but you go to work and one of the first things you do as a jock is you plug your headphones into the board and never have your headphones on and then plug in because the person, if you ever listen to somebody who's really hard of hearing, and they had them turned all the way up and you turn and they're like vibrating off your head, it's like it's so funny how loud some people listen to themselves. And it's I said, listen, you hear yourself two ways, through the air and the vibrations in your own skeletal structure or whatever. But it's when you have headphones on, it's like mainlining your voice, and your brain desperately wants to grab a hold of the steering wheel on 10 and 2 and manipulate the sound. But I have them on. I have them on just enough to hear the on one ear, just the for technical for just to make sure it came through
Right.
okay. But that's a really good. I've leaned away from the headphones
Yeah.
unless I really, unless it's something very intimate, like where I really need to kind of hear the nuance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Besides that, I don't really focus on. That's a good question. And so many of my students, I say, don't wear your headphones. Don't. And they're like, what? Why not? That's because you're
Because
listening to
it's
your voice, not
suddenly
yeah.
suddenly that will become the thing you're trying to do is sound good as opposed to connect. Let me get a couple of questions. This has been so interesting that I almost forgot about other people's questions. Max Goldberg, Mark, was it a challenge adapting from radio trained delivery to mastering the now popular conversational read?
God, it's so funny. That's a great question because when the late great Jerry Houston, my mentor, and this is 34 years ago, the phrases non-announcer, real person, authentic, natural, conversational, these adjectives have been percolating for decades now. And I remember him saying that, and I didn't really know what that really was. I because you like you said the headphones and hearing yourself and I thought it was very performative. And it hard to get out of that. I hit my head against the wall a number of times trying to think, I'm being very conversational. Would I speak that way to, now, it's not, I don't think it's necessarily that hard, but you have to draw a line of delineation between when you're on the air, I don't care what anybody says. They say, just be yourself. Well, if you are a radio personality, you may be close to 100%. You're never 100% yourself because who do you know that's 4 or 5 hours a day up and at them? There's
Yeah.
some,
There's there's a
but whereas
there's some acting involved.
absolutely, absolutely, and there's a dance with the music and the imaging and it's theater. With voiceover for me, I looked at it like I have something I call the 5 questions. The first question you ask is, who am I speaking with? Not to, not at, because with implies conversation, bi-directional communication. You are responding to somebody. You're not going to hear them. You're not going to know what they're thinking, but the words I say, if you're talking to your best friend on the telephone, you know how those words are landing with them and you know roughly what the reaction is going to be and you're already kind of bouncing off that. So that's a great question. I think that the conversation, that's why I believe, and I know this is a detour, but I don't believe AI will be a factor in voiceover. I mean, absolutely, but I think some people will play with it and they'll discard it later because the thing is, if humans crave the magnetism of authenticity. I mean, how do you feel when you find out on YouTube? You realize, oh, that's a fake voice. It feels so disconnected. We're humans. I think that I don't think they're ever going to AI is a fact. Who knows if I'd be a millionaire if I had a crystal ball and knew exactly the way things were going to play
No,
out.
you'd
But
be a billionaire if you had that crystal
very
ball.
true. Mark Zuckerberg's asked me for a loan. But there you go. It's this whole decades long progression towards more authenticity.
Mhm.
I don't believe that can just disappear. I
Yeah.
think that my kids' generation, Gen Z, how they consume media may affect it. I'm going way off topic, but I kind of figured you mentioned AI before, but I think I love the authenticity. I always move my students in the direction of fly your freak flag, your own special sauce. That's the magnetic thing people want, not
Yes.
just your voice. And
Yes.
so, was it hard to make the transition to answer that question in the most long-winded way possible? I was trying to do that in my early 20s where I was doing really well on radio, and it was that thing. Well, this is working well for me here, but the VO thing asked something different of me.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of this finding a good middle ground, I guess. And it was me hitting my head against the wall, just kind of until I finally recognized when I got out of radio completely from full time, and I could hear myself a little bit better, more objectively, I guess you could say. But yeah, I had some good coaches along the way, and they kind of, my working in promo, I do have to say, is one of those genres of voiceover where it's the announcer-ish thing can still live, but it's very nuanced. It's very
Because,
specific, and
I'm sure this happened with you, and I know we're going a little bit long, but because I came out of radio, the first thing that my agents said was, we're gonna try you out in promo. We think promo is a place for you, and I've done very well in promo over the years, even though in this part of my career, most people know me for video games.
Mhm.
But with promo, style can work. But
Yeah, it's so
ultimately,
hard to put my finger on it with students unless I always say it's junior to senior level coursework. If somebody wants to start in with promo, I'm like, God, you need a foundation with some commercial, little narration, and then step into promo because it is so,
it's a
it
different
kinda goes
animal.
against some of the rules.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it
it
has its
is.
own
You look.
language. When you
Oh,
start
yeah.
talking about tags and 8, 9, 7 central, and uh, they're just ways of saying things. Those ways change over the years, but there are still some rules. Got another question for you here. Let's
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
Um, DF Raisin, of all things along your career journey, is there anything that sticks out as your favorite job or assignment?
Oh, yeah, there are a couple. There are definitely a couple. My first big national, as I mentioned, I was 21 with Patrick Stewart, GTE commercial, and it taught me something very unique. I was 21 playing the father of a 34, I think she was 34, 35-year-old lady, but she sounded much younger. And here I am 21. I'm her, and it was like, oh, this is theater. This is, theater of the mind, and it was just kind of cool. It was the first time I kind of realized, oh, I'm really in this thing now. This is not me playing with it. This is not, I kind of feel like somebody tipped their hat to me. I can now join the union. Um, let's see, as far as jobs, oh geez, a couple times when I was for me it's just one of those things I knew was not necessarily getting older, but life experience. And I was a intern I went to school at University of North Texas. Then I went to Texas Tech University, and I was an intern slash news writer at the ABC station out there. And here, just a handful of years later, I was the voice of the station. Now, a guy named Doc Morgan was the voice back when I was in Doc. He worked at WFAA Dallas. Wonderful, very talented guy. But it was the first time I was like, wait, Doc worked on this frequency and this channel. Now I'm doing it. And, it, any job, it's really funny because anything where my kids could hear me and understand what I'm doing here, because they could see me in the booth when they were much younger, and I don't think it really processed where it was going and what it all, and they were very, very young. Now they get what I'm doing. And that was fun. But the different every job, it's really I've found more and more and more the people I get to work with, the creatives, because the job can be the same day, especially when you do promo day in day out. It's going to be a lot of the same thing, but the people I get to work with, maybe it's not some in specific situation, but anytime where I feel like I'm not the star, I'm part of the machine and I'm showing up collaborating. That for me is fun. I don't know if it's a little more esoteric of an answer,
Mark,
but
I'm going to tell you, I love your esoteric answers. You echo so much of what I think and feel about this business and our place in it. I think once you start, hey, well, I'm the star of this thing, I think you're on the way to um, failure. I'm not saying your career will go away, but I think when you keep that idea that I'd mentioned about you before, the professional student, you're working,
Mhm.
but you're always still trying to learn and grow. I think when you hang on to that, understanding I know a lot, I don't know it all, and I'm willing to rediscover. I feel like sometimes I learn from my students that
Yeah,
something
I
that
think
they
you realize when you realize you don't know, it's people come to you for advice and guidance and wisdom, and sometimes it's oh, I didn't think of it like that. Like they give you a delivery, it's like, well, I didn't even think about that. That's they
exactly
did that all on their own, which
exactly
is a breakthrough. Yeah.
something that I didn't think. You know what? That works. Nice. And what I love about it is when it's really them. When they're not trying to fake something. It's just the music of their voice. It's how they would say it, and it brings an honesty to it uh, that you might not have had if they were trying to. Oh, I think it should go up here and underline here, and this word's important. Um, but you know what,
I don't know
Mark?
if you run into the situation where some people say to you, it's like, listen, uh, somebody's doing a quote on one of the I don't mean I don't want to bring any negativity, but the evaluations that some people say, I was evaluated, they say I can do this. It's like a date. I need to spend some time with you, work with you before I can give you feedback and know. And I love being surprised because, and then, I've had at least one student who was turned down by a coach or two because they didn't think he had it. Now he's doing nationals, and I'm so proud of him. But, one of the things that I absolutely love is when a student gives me something that I get to use with my other students. There's a fellow who actually is in Lafayette, Louisiana. I worked with him. I said something about asking 5 questions and the preparation. And he said to me, it's kind of like a daydream. I was like, God, that's perfect. When you're preparing, your imagination's just flowing, and I can't, and I'm plagiarizing him all over the place. I'm telling my students, I said, listen, your preparation, your pre-flight, it's a daydream. Let your creativity fly, and that's when cool things happen. When your student gives you a nugget that you get to use with other students, it's like I feel like I need to be paying royalties now to
Well,
some of them
it's funny, Mark, because when you teach, you're always trying to find new ways of expressing really the same thing. But not
Mhm.
everybody understands. When you say it ABC, now you got to try to XYZ, and now you got to mix letters. Finding that way to say something, and they get it. And
Mhm.
it's nice when what you just said there. I said, oh, it's kind of like a daydream. And I understood that. I'm not sure that's one I'll use. Maybe it'll sneak out of me at some point. But that idea of what happens in a daydream? You're thinking about things. You're having an imagination, and my dogs are going crazy. I think mommy's coming
Love the
home.
puppies.
But I love the and you know what we are so over time. I've kept you so late. It's 7:08. I need to end this. But Mark, I'm going to tell you, I have really, really enjoyed talking with you. This is
Oh,
probably
it's always a pleasure.
yeah.
I was telling somebody the other day. I said, you were the best part of that's voiceover for my daughter Emma. She's could care less about like it was you and Joan were like, they were like, it's like, oh, I was sitting with Dave during. It's like, you realize I was on stage talking about doing a thing. Yeah, but I was talking to Dave. I was like, oh. It's so funny. You think you're like, hi, I'm Marc Preston. I'm just kidding. And your kids are like, yeah, just don't care.
Yeah,
They keep you,
kids
they keep
never
you
think their
honest.
parents are cool. But listen, tell her I said hello and thank you. I appreciate her admiration. I'm humbled by it. But she needs to know what a badass her daddy is.
Oh, that's very kind. Actually, I saw my son show up in the little. I just figured out how to open up the feed here, and I say hello to Amber, who's yeah. It's so funny. I just saw the names like DF Raisin. Love that name, by the way. DF Raisin. That's the best name in the world. Donnell. You got some cool people hanging out here. Tim
I do.
Tippett, good people.
I do. And a lot of people that never comment, never show up and say anything, that I discover I'm out and about. Oh, man, I love Ask Dave Fennoy Anything. Well, I've never seen you on there. It's, oh, well, I just...
Well, you know what you got to do now, thevoiceovercommunity.com. I've got to include this as one of our featured podcasts. I don't know why we're in there. We got to get you up there. We got some great podcasts
You know why?
up there.
Because there's lots going on, and sometimes we just don't know or not aware or whatever. But Marc, I want to thank you. You're going to be at VO Atlanta, right?
I have some things that have just kind of come up that unfortunately I'm not going to be able to make it this year. And I just got in touch with J. Michael Collins. I said, I am so sorry. It's good stuff, but I'm not going to be able to make it this year. But the voiceover community, we're still proudly supporting everything going on there. But I will be going to One Voice, without a doubt, my hometown, Dallas, Texas. So I got to get there. And, so if you're down there, I expect you to be in boots, Dave.
Cowboy boots.
But,
My wife loves cowboy boots.
But no, I was planning. I definitely was planning on being there, but just a lot of things going on with our move here, and just as that phrase "man plans, God laughs." You know, so it was a plan, but next year most certainly. But I will be at One Voice this year, so without a doubt.
Well, listen, Marc, I just want to say thank you for joining me and giving us some of your time, your wisdom, your thoughts. And this has been just a joy. And whenever we are in the same town together, I'd love to, break bread, have a drink, maybe one of those Modelo Lights.
Modelo Oro. I found this thing, man. It's 90 calories. Things you think of at the age of
the age of a
2 hours, 48 minutes, going to be 51. I've had a 50-year-old year. Now it's time to start cruising towards 60, I guess.
Well, what I say to that is I remember 51.
but no, hey, this was more than a pleasure. This is so much fun. I think this is an opportunity to do what I love doing, talking about this thing we do, and one of the reasons I started the voiceover community and do what I do is I know there are other people out there who want to know. It's like I got this passion for this weird thing nobody else understands, and hey, listen, this is a tribe of some pretty badass people.
Yes.
And so every week, you're doing your thing, and some great mensches out there, as I say, doing great work, saying, hey, you know what? It's great to be a weirdo and doing this thing. This is the best gig going, and talking about it, sitting down with you is just a perk. It's a benefit, definitely. So I appreciate you. The invite is very appreciated.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Marc Preston. Wow. Great conversation. And if you missed part of it or want to watch it again, listen to it again, this and all the other Ask Dave Fennoy Anythings live on my YouTube channel, Dave Fennoy Voiceover Training. If you're interested in voiceover coaching with me, davefennoy.com, click on the Study VO tab at the top. Follow me on Twitter, Twitter X, at Dave Fennoy, at Dave Fennoy VO. All right. Once again, thank you, Marc. And for those who are here and listening, let me advise you to do this between now and the next time. Book something.